un mundo tan desafiante. Nuestro reto es ser la luz, dar amor día con día.
Ven y seamos esperanza, testimonio de valores, de unidad y de alegría.
Nuestro segundo panel, que es un panel que se llama El futuro de la sociedad pasa por el futuro de la familia. Porque cuando hay familias fuertes, la sociedad es más fuerte. Cuando las familias sufren, la sociedad sufre. El desarrollo sostenible solo es posible, solo es factible con familias fuertes. En torno a esta idea, a esta reflexión nos acompañan grandes personalidades que vienen solamente para estar con ustedes hoy, esta mañana, de distintas partes del mundo. Vienen entre ellos, en primer lugar,
muy bien,
al cardenal, y les pido un fuerte aplauso cuando vaya mencionando a cada uno de ellos, por favor, su eminentísima y reverendísima cardenal Gerhard Ludwig Müller, quien sirvió el cardenal Müller sirvió como prefecto de la Congregación para la Doctrina de la Fe durante el pontificado de Benedicto XVI y durante los primeros años del pontificado del Papa Francisco. El cardenal Müller es un hombre de fe y es un hombre de mucha fortaleza y también un gran defensor de la verdad. Bienvenido, señor cardenal.
Nuestro siguiente participante es Jim Daly. Él es autor, locutor y presidente de Focus on the Family. Bajo su liderazgo, el ministerio ha reformado su tradicional manera de ayudar a las parejas a construir matrimonios fuertes y a criar hijos sanos y resilientes. Un fuerte aplauso.
Y para presentar a nuestro siguiente conferencista, queremos pedirle a Doc Clark. Ok, muy bien. Bueno, pues lo presento yo. Él es Wilford Anderson, autoridad general emérita de la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días. Bienvenido.
Nuestra siguiente participante es Valerie Huber, es presidenta de Amigos del Protocolo de Ginebra y en 2018 promovió la defensa de la ley del latido fetal en Iowa, Estados Unidos.
Muy bien, pues le vamos concediendo la palabra, en primer lugar, al señor cardenal, su eminencia, Gerhard Ludwig Müller.
Sia laudato Jesucristo. Queridos hermanos y hermanas, amigos de la familia cristiana, me dijeron al comienzo que alguien ha desconectado la electricidad, la energía, pero ninguno puede desconectarnos de Dios, de la cual porque de Dios viene la verdadera energía para nuestra vida, la verdad natural y la verdad revelada sobre la familia. Comienzo con un pensador, un filósofo tedesco que quisiera desconectarnos de Dios. Él se llama Friedrich Nietzsche. Él es el profeta del nihilismo postcristiano. Él proclamó tras la muerte de Dios el superhombre que es para sí mismo su propio Dios y Creador. Han muerto todos los dioses, ahora anhelamos que viva el superhombre. En nuestros días, el historiador Yuval Noah Harari nos ofrece actualmente una nueva edición de este programa de autosuperación del hombre como creador de un ser híbrido biotécnico superior en su libro titulado Homo Deus. El hombre es su propio Dios. Sus tesis suenan inteligentes y ágiles y son sorprendentemente populares entre nuestros muy mediocres políticos e ideólogos, que en virtud de su cargo deberían estar más interesados en favorecer los seres humanos que en suprimirlos. ¿Por qué tiene éxito esto Harari o Friedrich Nietzsche? ¿Por qué personas adultas que piensan se dejan diseccionar su cuerpo voluntariamente o inflan su ego hasta tal punto que aunque no llega a convertirse en Dios, sino que amenazan con estallar? La respuesta teológica es sencilla. El nihilismo antropológico tiene como padre el orgullo de la criatura que quiere llegar a ser como Dios y quiere establecer la diferencia entre el bien y el mal, lo verdadero y lo falso por sí misma. Y tiene como su madre la locura ciega de los impios que cambian la gloria del Dios incorruptible por sus imágenes ideológicas autofabricadas. Cuando el hombre adora la creación en lugar del Creador, pierde la gloria de los hijos y los amigos de Dios. El nihilismo antropológico es significativamente hostil a la vida, tanto en su forma filosófica como en el pathos ideológico emancipatorio de la ideología gender, la ideología woke, que combina lo social, así como la política de identidad y de la cultura. Aunque en algunos puntos se limita a recalentar viejos patrones clásicos de la arrogancia, por ejemplo, la exigencia de matar a los niños en el vientre materno como un derecho humano, la exigencia utilitaria de la llamada muerte piadosa es la eutanasia, como en los tiempos de los nazis, para los seres humanos agotados o ya no utilizables. Pero delante de Dios no vale estos valores humanos. Para cada uno tiene su valor en sí mismo. Este valor viene de Dios nuestro Creador. Pero los frutos podridos del nihilismo antropológico también se muestran en el cuestionamiento del matrimonio entre el hombre y la mujer, que se ve como una variante entre cualquier número de posibilidades del disfrute orgiástico, de la satisfacción sexual, sin la plena entrega en el amor y sin la autotrascendencia a un tercero, a saber, el niño como fruto del amor y el vientre de sus padres. Se niega la referencia a la fecundidad del matrimonio con la que el Creador ha bendecido al hombre y la mujer para que transmitan guardan y promuevan la vida creada por Dios. Aparte, todos los seres humanos, incluso antes de su existencia histórica en el espacio, en el tiempo, todos somos elegidos desde la eternidad por Dios y predestinados en el amor a ser sus hijos, hijas, por medio de Jesucristo y acercarse a Él según la bondadosa voluntad. Aparte del hecho biológicamente probado de que no es posible un cambio real del sexo, la ficción de una libre elección del género es una negación de la voluntad de Dios para nuestra persona. Dios nos ha volado o hombres o mujeres, y esto es una cosa buena. Cada ser humano existe en su naturaleza corporal, ya sea en expresión masculina o femenina. La ideología del género, que ciertamente también entra bajo el paraguas del nihilismo antropológico, privó tanto al hombre como a la mujer de sus propias posibilidades. Un hombre, en virtud de su disposición espiritual y corporal, tiene la grande posibilidad de convertirse en un esposo amoroso para su esposa y en un padre fiel para sus hijos. Pero no puede ser esposa o madre de otra persona sin traicionarse a sí mismo. Y así, la misma cosa como una mujer que puede ser una esposa de su hombre y la madre de sus hijos. El apóstol Pablo ya lo sabía, porque el Señor no hay mujer sin hombre, ni hombre sin mujer. Porque como el hombre viene de Dios, así el hombre viene al mundo por medio de la mujer. Pero todas las cosas vienen de Dios. Nosotros podemos ser orgullosos, ser creados hombres o mujeres. Esto no es un mal y por eso no abbiamo bisogno el cambio del género. El cambio del género es una inspiración del diablo. Ahí está la primera frase principal de la antropología cristiana. La antropología cristiana, como pensamos del hombre como un ser de la creación, que aumenta todo toque nihilista, así como la presunta autocreación, como el sol naciente aumenta las sombras de la noche. El Concilio Vaticano II ha dicho: el hombre mujer es la única criatura querida por Dios, por sí misma, que solo puede encontrarse a sí misma mediante la ofrenda perfecta y sincera de sí misma. Jesucristo es el Verbo hecho carne, el Logos de Dios Padre. Nos revela la idea que Dios tiene de nosotros, representada en nuestra naturaleza corporal y social. Cuando pregunta a los sofistas de todos los tiempos: ¿no habéis leído que en el principio el Creador los hizo varón y hembra, para relevar en ello el misterio del matrimonio? Por eso el hombre dejará a su padre y a su madre y se unirá a su mujer, y los dos serán una sola carne. Nadie puede reformar o modernizar la enseñanza de Cristo, porque Él mismo en su encarnación trajo consigo toda la novedad y modernidad para renovar y vivificar al hombre. Así lo dijo Ireneo de León: recientemente declarado doctor de la Iglesia por el Papa Francisco, como los agnósticos, gnósticos y maniqueos de todos los tiempos. Nosotros, los cristianos, nosotros somos los modernos. Nosotros no somos conservadores de los antiguos tiempos. Nosotros somos del tiempo moderno, en la plenitud de los tiempos que he venido en Jesucristo. Nosotros somos la vanguardia de la humanidad. Y los demás que niegan la identidad del hombre como varón y mujer, y que niegan el matrimonio como el raíz, el fuente del amor y del futuro, estos son del pasado bajo el poder del pecado. El cristianismo promueve una civilización de la vida, una cultura de la vida, e desafía questa contracultura del nihilismo antropológico che tendría que terminar en el suicidio collettivo della umanità. Senza matrimonio un uomo che pensa un poco, mueve un poco su pensamiento, senza el matrimonio de hombre y mujer no hará ningún futuro, ni biológicamente, ni psicológicamente, ni espiritualmente, ni religiosamente, ni teológicamente. Es la unidad entre la naturaleza creada por Dios y la vida en la gracia, en el amor. El ateísmo es un nihilismo, es un antihumanismo. Esta cultura de la muerte, siempre el fruto es la muerte. Contra esto ya San Pablo ha dicho, porque el fruto del pecado es la muerte, para el don de Dios es la vida eterna en Cristo nuestro Señor. Queridos amigos, nuestra fe en el Dios y Padre de Jesucristo, Cristo supera questa cultura de la muerte contra la vida de los niños, contra el matrimonio, contra el amor, y esta cultura de la muerte es el nihilismo antropológico. La fe en Dios nos abre a una cultura de la vida en el amor del Dios, Padre, Hijo y Espíritu Santo. Porque nosotros somos liberados de la esclavitud de lo pasajero a la libertad y la gloria de los hijos, las hijas de Dios. Esto es nuestra fe cristiana. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos sus palabras, señor cardenal. Gracias por venir desde un lugar lejano, pero muy cercano a nuestro corazón. Muchísimas gracias.
Y a continuación, le damos el espacio a Jim Daly, el presidente de Focus on the Family. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor.
Buenos dias. It's good to be with you. I understand somebody tried to disconnect the speaker's cord. Is that right? Somebody tried to Oh, but guess what? They can't disconnect our heart from God. Eh? That's it. Hey, it's an honor to be with you from Colorado. Thank you so much for the invitation. Brian and the team, the volunteers to pull this together, thank you so very much. They've done a great job, haven't they? Yeah. All right, it's not going to surprise many of you in this audience that what the larger political, media, and academic culture have been pushing on society has been a massive failure disguised in government programs that promise to improve the lives of children, women, men, and society. In reality, these plans, proposals, and programs have profoundly denigrated the family. In fact, Boise State political science professor Scott Yenner, in his book, The Recovery of Family Life, Exposing the Limits of Modern Ideologies, calls what has been happening to the family a rolling revolution. It's been a calculated, deliberate attack upon the defining ideals of family that rolls systemically from objective to objective, agenda to agenda. Now, let's be clear, no one really disputes this. It's happening. We are only debating whether this revolution has been healthy or unhealthy, good or bad. And one's answer largely depends on their perspective on the nature and reality of what T.S. Eliot called the permanent things. Let's never lose sight of an important fact. Those pushing this rolling revolution have long wanted three things. One, divorce sex from marriage, procreation, and parenting. Two, fundamentally redefine marriage and the reality of male and female. We're seeing this right now in our culture. Fully celebrate each and every new form of alternative family and identity. These three objectives are causing great harm to those who are most vulnerable. The social science collected over the last 50 years is irrefutable on that point, and most of you know it all too well. As we survey this research, it is nearly impossible to find one significant measure of human well-being that the rolling revolution to dismantle the family has improved. Some might say it has improved the lot of women, but is that really true in terms of what matters most? Let me give you just one example from the scholarship. Let's look at declining female happiness. In 2009, two scholars from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania published their findings with the influential National Bureau of Economic Research. The title of their paper, The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness. The scholars explain that up until the 1970s, women had traditionally reported higher levels of life satisfaction and happiness compared to men. But they lament that has changed, and substantially so. These scholars explain, we will show in this paper that women's happiness has fallen both absolutely and relative to men's in a pervasive way. These scholars can only guess at what is driving this notable declining happiness in women. They offer a number of hypotheses, but the final one they offer, I want to read it to you exactly as they wrote it. They said, finally, the changes brought about through the women's movement may have decreased women's happiness. The lead author of this study is a woman, her name is Betsy Stevenson, a Wellesley grad. She served on President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors for several years. The point is, this woman is not a conservative. And it was feminist Diana Pierce, a scholar directing the Center for Women's Welfare at the University of Washington, who coined the important term, the feminization of poverty, in 1978 in a paper on how women were faring under the advances of the women's movement. Her opening line stated, poverty is rapidly becoming a female problem. Why? Pierce explained that for many, the price of women's independence has become their pauperization and dependence on welfare. Think of that, dependence on welfare. Keep in mind it was Democrats, progressives, pointing out this fact, but this failure to improve real human well-being and happiness is what happens when a culture separates out the essential triangle of marriage, sex, and procreation, and there is nothing progressive nor compassionate about causing increased suffering. At Focus on the Family, we hear from hundreds of people every week, who are suffering deeply from what culture is intentionally doing to the ideal of the family. The stories are increasingly heartbreaking and takes all of this out of the theoretical and puts it right into the day-to-day practical. For a society that says it is so deeply concerned for social justice, it certainly is pushing an agenda that is doing profound damage to the most vulnerable. Family restoration is the greatest social justice work that can be done. And I want to demonstrate how academics from the left have told us as much. It's a great irony in a story the popular press and the left-wing politicians don't want to talk about. While it is radical liberals prescribing and pushing the rolling revolution, it is ironically center-left scholars who are telling us through their important and careful scholarship that the revolution is a deeply harmful failure, just like we saw on the declining happiness of women. They say, the left tells us why the natural family matters if we listen to them carefully. Let me start with the UN Conference on the Rights of the Child. It is a troubling document that Focus on the Family and many in this audience have long resisted. But we should all note something. Article 7 declares perhaps the most conservative statement about human rights and experiencing that human right that can be uttered. It says, "The child shall, as far as possible, have the right to know and be cared for by his or her parents." Now, this is before the term parents was redefined to mean some loving adult. It means mother and father. That's what the UN is saying. I suspect almost everyone in this audience is familiar with the Moynihan Report from the United States. In this U.S. modern debate on how the breakdown of the family is hurting the most vulnerable started with Democrats in the Johnson administration in the mid-1960s. That's when Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who went on to become a great senator of New York, was Assistant Secretary of Labor under President Johnson. He wrote a groundbreaking academic report on the state of the black family in America. He said, blacks in America will never achieve their full dreams as citizens if we ignore the tragic decline of the black family. He called it literally a case for national action. The first page of this report said this, and I want to put it on the screen. The fundamental problem in which this is most clearly the case is that of family structure. The evidence, not final, but powerfully persuasive, is that the Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Have you ever heard anything more conservative? But saying such things in 1965 was controversial even then. In fact, Moynihan said, if my head were sticking on a pike at the southwest gate of the White House grounds, the impression of disdain toward me would hardly be greater. This was the start of the modern public debate on the importance of family, health, and formation. This speech was given in 1965 from a former Democrat, and it was divisive. But let's move forward a little bit to another politician who served in the White House under President George H.W. Bush, Vice President Dan Quayle. He once gave an equally vilified talk about the dangers and downsides of well-educated, financially independent women choosing to have babies without husbands. Mr. Quayle's public roasting was worse than Moynihan's, but it was a liberal-leaning Democrat social researcher who came to his defense. That was Barbara Defoe Whitehead, who wrote the most widely circulated and reprinted article in The Atlantic's 160-year history, entitled, Dan Quayle Was Right. It was 1993, and Miss Whitehead explained, children in single-parent families are 6 times as likely to be poor. They are also likely to stay poor longer. 22% of children in one-parent families will experience poverty during childhood for 7 years or more. as compared with only 2% of children in the two-parent family. Of course, these realities continue today. In fact, they've gotten worse. Curiously, Barbara Defoe Whitehead was perhaps the first person to say this on a national stage who wasn't viciously attacked. This is because the message was precisely on par with some important scholars doing groundbreaking research for a JFK-like governor known as Bill Clinton. In his run-up to the presidency in the 1990s, Clinton collected a group of formidable social scientists to develop policy measures for him. Two of these, Bill Galston, who became Bill Clinton's White House domestic policy advisor, and Elaine Kamarack, made some of the most important and foundational statements about the importance of the married two-parent family that have ever been uttered. They sounded as if they were pro-family conservatives, but they were liberal Democrats doing good and honest social science. We quoted their work quite often at Focus on the Family. Let me offer some examples of what Galston and Kamarack wrote in an important white paper for the Progressive Policy Institute. It is no exaggeration to say that a stable two-parent family is in an American child's best interest or best protection against poverty. Sharply rising rates of divorce, unwed mothers, and runaway fathers do not represent alternative lifestyles. They are rather patterns of adult behavior with profoundly negative consequences for children. That is a good statement. Families have primary responsibility for instilling traits such as discipline, ambition, respect for the law, and respect for others, a responsibility that cannot be discharged as effectively by auxiliary social institutions such as public schools. These were not conservative right-wingers. These are left-center people. Another important scholar from this group, Isabel Sawhill, is a relentless advocate for child well-being and a colleague and close friend of Galston's at the center-left Brookings Institute. She made this bold statement some years ago. The proliferation of single-parent households accounts for virtually all of the increase in child poverty since the 1970s. Wow! However, the unchallenged dean of sociologists studying how the family revolution has impacted women and children is Princeton University's Sarah McClanahan, who sadly passed away last year. She's responsible for the $17 million Fragile Families and Child Well-Being Study, a monumental joint project between Princeton University and Columbia. In a well-known and often repeated quote, McClanahan wrote in 1994, "If we were asked to design a system for making sure that children's basic needs were met, we would probably come up with something quite similar to the two-parent family ideal. Such a design would not only ensure that children had access to the time and money of two adults, it would also provide a system of checks and balances to promote quality parenting. The fact that both have a biological connection to the child would increase the likelihood that parents would identify with the child and be willing to sacrifice for that child, and it would reduce the likelihood that neither parent would abuse the child. While we recognize that two-parent families frequently do not live up to this ideal in all respects, nevertheless, we would expect children who grow up in two-parent families to be doing better on average than children who grow up with only one parent." McClanahan demonstrated how married mothers and fathers provide countless and unexpected benefits for children, parents, and society. It would not be unfair to say no one holds a candle to her. Let us fast forward to the 2000s and the work of scholars at the Urban Institute, demonstrating the power of marriage among low-income minority communities. In a collection of 4 important white papers, American University economist Robert Lehrman, concentrating on low-income populations, explains from his findings, married couples have incomes nearly 4 times their basic needs, a ratio that is 30 to 70% higher than what cohabiting couples experience and 63 to 113% higher than what single parents with another living adult, such as a sibling, a friend, or a mother, experience. So it is marriage and not just the presence of another adult helping hands that really produce a family. Additionally, Lehrman concluded, The results reveal that marriage significantly and substantially reduces the likelihood of poverty, holding constant for family background, race and ethnicity, age and education. Being married reduces poverty by 2/3. And it was Jonathan Rauch, a center-left journalist writing for the National Journal, now at the Brookings Institution, who noted that the growing class divide in America and elsewhere was not so much due to education, race, or ethnicity, but actually marriage. Rauch said that those who are married, regardless of education, race, and other socioeconomic factors, were doing well in society, moving up the ladder. Those who did not, as a group, declined, the unmarried. In his brief and game-changing essay entitled The Widening Marriage Gap, Rauch colorfully put it this way: poverty correlates more strongly with a family's marital status than with its race. According to Census Bureau data, a two-parent black household is more likely to be poor than is a two-parent white household, but both are far less likely to be poor than a mother-only household of either race. In other words, if you're a baby about to be born, your best odds are to choose married black parents over unmarried white parents. An increasingly post-marriage culture is further demonstrating the clear dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. It's marriage. Sarah McClanahan famously said, marriage was the primary factor for the diverging destinies of those who were advancing in society and those who are falling behind. It's marriage. To stress again, it was progressives who were saying it perhaps better than anyone. So let's jump to the present. Let's talk about today briefly. Just last month, Professor Melissa Kearney, a University of Maryland economist, research associate at the prestigious National Bureau of Economic Research, and senior fellow at Brookings, published a very important economics paper. Kearney demonstrates in her new paper how the lower middle class family has all but collapsed. Little has changed in the family makeup of the poor and the well-to-do. Marriage is very rare amongst the first, but is strong for the latter. So where's the decline happening most? Among the middle class. They are mimicking the poor and more in marital decline. But this is not because their marriages are failing. It's because they're not being formed in the first place. Across the population, Kearney explains, the most recent decline in the share of children living in married parent homes primarily reflects an increase in non-marital childbearing, not a rise in divorce rates. Specifically, she shows, in 1980, only 22% of single mothers were never married, while 64% were divorced. Today, 52% of single mothers were never married, and only 39% were divorced. For men, in 2005, 50% of men ages 24 to 34 were married. In 2020, it had fallen to only 35%. It's increasingly the case that marriage is not being tried and failing, but not being tried at all. This is problematic for children, as even failed marriages can provide benefits in contrast to those in never married households. Children who have a divorced father in their life are shown to do much better on a variety of measures than their peers with an absent father. Dr. Kearney shows this is happening most predominantly among high school graduates and non-graduates. The family divide between marriage and non-marriage is becoming an education divide, and this is a new disturbing phenomenon. The only place where divorce remains the primary driver of single parenthood is among the college-educated, a group that already is well-equipped to manage those storms. Kearney explained, the share of children living with an unparented mother is more than 2 times as high among children whose mothers have a high school degree than it is among children whose mothers have a 4-year college degree. As a result, she concludes, the steep decline in the share of children living with married parents, or more generally with 2 parents, has happened largely outside of the college-educated class. Professor Kearney mourns the shift as she admits the essential contribution married mothers and fathers make to children and society well-being. She said, "The evidence suggesting that children do better when they live in a home with both mother and father present, especially boys, suggests that improving children's outcomes and closing class gaps in outcomes between the children of college, educated parents, and others will require confronting the multidimensional challenges facing non-college adults, especially men, that have led to the erosion of marriage and the two-parent family among wide swaths of the population." She goes on to say this, "In short, here's the truth. When it comes to progressive elites, do as they do, not as they say." Actually, I'm saying that. This means two important points. First, the poor and less educated are doubly disadvantaged by the family formation choices they are increasingly making away from marriage. Second, college-educated elites are actually less likely to follow the relativistic rhetoric of love makes a family. Elite classes are far more likely to be more married-minded in their actual actions while celebrating family diversity in their rhetoric. As our friend, University of Virginia sociologist Brad Wilcox, who has spoken here many times, wrote in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago, "Next time you hear a college-educated academic or advocate undercut married motherhood and fatherhood as the foundation of family, do as they do, not as they say." Likewise, my conclusion, the rolling revolution of family redefinition being pushed and celebrated by elite and radical voices on the left has proven alarmingly harmful in nearly every way by leading liberal-leaning scholars. And let me end with an extremely prescient quote from G.K. Chesterton in The Superstition of Divorce. "This triangle of truisms of father, mother, and child cannot be destroyed. It can only destroy those civilizations which disregard it." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim Daly, for that excellent contribution to our Congress. It is now my honor to introduce Elder Wilford W. Anderson, who is a General Authority 70 Emeritus of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He received a business management degree and a law degree from Brigham Young University and began his professional career in Southern California as in-house counsel for Bank of America. He later founded and managed a highly successful investment firm in Arizona. His extensive church service includes leadership responsibilities in some of the most tumultuous areas of the world, presiding over the church's massive humanitarian relief to the people of Haiti following the earthquake, and also to many of the refugees in the Middle East as they fled the ravages of war. But if you were to ask Elder Anderson what his most important accomplishment has been, he would undoubtedly talk about his family and the 9 children he and Kathleen have raised. I was blessed to see how they did this because we lived right next door to them for 12 years. Their example was a master class in marriage and parenting, and perhaps the best way to describe what they did in their home would be to repeat this statement that I heard in the United Nations General Assembly years ago at the 10th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. Quote, "As the cradle of life and love for each new generation, the family is the primary source of personal identity, self-esteem, and support for children. It is also the first and foremost school of life, uniquely suited to teach children integrity, character, morals, responsibility, service, and wisdom." End of quote. Thank you, Elder Anderson, for joining us today. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Doug, for that very generous introduction. Agradezco la invitación de estar con ustedes esta mañana y espero que mis pensamientos les sean de provecho. I'm going to speak to you in English, and I understand that there's excellent translation. I liked Doug's quote from the General Assembly of the United Nations, that the family provides the primary source for personal identity, self-esteem, and support for children. I believe that statement, and I know that you do too. And so I thank you sincerely for the work that you're doing, efforts you are making against some fairly significant headwinds to protect and promote and teach about the family and its important role in society. You're doing God's work. I believe He will bless you for your efforts. Over a decade ago, at the World Congress of Families in Amsterdam, the following warning was sounded, quote, "On all sides, the family is under attack. Many wonder if the institution is no longer needed. Our response is certain. If there is any hope for the future of nations, that hope resides in the family," end quote. The speaker was Russell M. Nelson, who currently serves as the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That church's document, The Family, a Proclamation up to the World, likewise emphasizes that the family is the foundational unit of society, and in so doing echoes the timeless truth acknowledged in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles recently told members of Argentina's Senate and the Chamber of Deputies, quote, "My friends, the family matters. For a nation's values and strengths are but the sum total of the values and strengths of its families." No wonder that Pope Francis recently declared, "Every threat to the family is a threat to society itself. The future of humanity passes through the family. So protect your families, see in them your country's greatest treasure, and nourish them always." Today I wish to focus on how we as parents can treasure and nourish our families, and why the family is the primary source of personal identity, self-esteem, and support for children. Let me begin by telling you about my parents, who spoke very little about the things that we should do and not do, but spoke often about who we were and who we were not. They focused on identity. My parents taught us about their parents and their grandparents, and they taught us about God. Isn't it interesting that of all the important titles that He could use, He asks us to direct to Him our words and prayers as our Father, which means that I am a child of God, and so are you. And so is every human being that lives in this world. That is a statement of personal identity. It's both personal and universal to all mankind. As children, my siblings and I came to understand that we were not alone in the universe. We were accountable to God and to our extended family members. We were links in a chain, a multi-generational family organization that was much bigger than ourselves. And we had a responsibility to pass down to our own children that which we learned from those who went before. My parents spoke more of responsibilities than about opportunities, more about duties than rights, and more about contributions than benefits. When I was married and began my own family, I asked my father what he did to become such a successful parent. He said that he wouldn't know whether or not he was a successful parent until he came to know his grandchildren. He understood that he wasn't merely raising parents, he wasn't really merely raising children, he was raising future parents. The difference is subtle but profound. He wasn't just trying to raise his children to do what's right, he was trying to instill in them a desire to do what's right, a desire that could then be passed down to future generations. And therein lies the difference between the family and the myriad other organizations and institutions that seek to influence the lives of the rising generations. Governments, schools, and civic organizations can at times be good at teaching conduct. They can teach children what they should do, but it is a loving family that can best teach children who they are and what they can become, thereby instilling in them a desire to live in a way that will bring them happiness. I once listened to a radio station, an interview of a young doctor who had worked for a time on the Navajo Indian Reservation in northern Arizona in a hospital there. He said that one day an elderly Native American man with long braided hair came into the hospital. The doctor picked up his clipboard and asked the man what was wrong. The man stared straight ahead and said nothing. The doctor tried again. "I can't help you if you won't talk to me," he said. "Why have you come to the hospital?" Again there was silence, until finally the man looked at the doctor and asked, "Do you dance?" Wondering if perhaps his patient was a tribal medicine man who believed in healing through music and dance, the young doctor responded, "No, I don't dance. Do you dance?" The patient nodded in the affirmative. The amused doctor then asked, "Can you teach me to dance?" The patient's response was significant. "I can teach you to dance," he said, "but you have to hear the music." He understood something the doctor had not considered. He understood that dancing without music is very difficult. It is awkward and unpleasant. Various organizations can teach conduct. They can teach children the dance steps, but they are less successful in teaching children to hear the music. The dance steps are the things that we do. The music is the sense of identity and purpose that motivates and gives meaning to the beauty of the dance. Disassociating the dance steps from the music that inspires the dance is simply unsustainable. Somehow, children must come to hear the music, and that is where the family becomes essential. When my brothers and I, when we were young, would sometimes argue, Mother would say, "You can say anything you want to your brother Wilford, so long as you say it with a loving smile on your face." Have you ever tried to argue with a loving smile on your face? It's hilarious. That is a directive that would never and could never come from a judicial magistrate or a congressional edict. They don't have that kind of power. But a mother can get away with it because of a different kind of power she holds. There are two kinds of power in this world. One is the kind of boss wields when he says, "Come to work on time or I will fire you." It is the same kind of power the government exercises when it says, "Don't steal, because if you do, we will put you in jail." This kind of power relies upon rules, laws, threats, intimidation, and compulsion. It is exerted by the power figure. It focuses on conduct, but it seldom changes lives, because when the compulsion ends, the misconduct returns. The other kind of power is freely given to the power figure. It focuses not on outward conduct, but on the heart. It arises from attributes of love and kindness in those who possess it. We defer to them because we love and respect them and don't want to disappoint them. In the process, we exercise our own agency. We choose to obey, and we ourselves grow and become better. In the scriptural canon of my church, there is a verse that teaches, quote, "No power or influence can or ought to be maintained only by persuasion, by long-suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned, by kindness and pure knowledge," end quote. There is power in these attributes of love and kindness. Joseph Smith, the first prophet of our church, stated, quote, "Nothing is so much calculated to lead people to forsake sin as to take them by the hand and watch over them with tenderness. When persons manifest the least kindness and love to me, oh, what power it has over my mind, while the opposite course has a tendency to harrow up all the harsh feelings and depress the human mind," end quote. This is the kind of power a loving mother employs when she asks a child to do something and the child obeys, not out of compulsion, but out of desire. The child does it because she or he hears the music of love at home. Here's another example. My father was a strong, big man, but he was also kind and gentle, and he seldom told us what we could or could not do. That was not his way. Rather, when we would ask permission to do something, he would ask a series of questions. I once asked him if I could go fishing for a weekend in the mountains with some friends. Instead of simply saying no, he inquired, "When would you leave?" "Friday after school," I responded. "And when would you return home?" "Late Sunday night." "Do you have responsibilities at church on Sunday morning?" "Yes, but I can get a substitute," I insisted. "Do you have homework assignments due Monday morning?" "Yes, but I can get up early Monday morning and get them done." "Would you plan to go to church on Sunday?" "No, Dad," I replied. "The church is too far away, but we could read a scripture in the tent before leaving to go fishing." Then, instead of laying down the law and dictating what I should do, he simply stated, "If it were me, I would not go." I remember thinking, "Dad, just tell me what to do. It's easier that way." But that was not his way. He wanted me to make the decision and to be accountable for its consequences. And I loved him and respected him too much to go against his will. That's a relationship that is very difficult to develop outside of a loving family. Some of you are probably thinking it's fine to encourage children to hear the music, but many parents have a hard time staying on pitch themselves. How can we expect them to teach children to hear the music? But building strong families is too important to allow ourselves to become discouraged. Every accomplished musician knows that it takes a lot of practice to perform beautiful music. So, if the basses in the family choir are too loud and overbearing, or if the string section in the family orchestra is a little too sharp and too shrill, or if those impetuous piccolos are out of tune or out of control, just keep practicing. We don't give up on each other. We stay together and keep practicing. With our best efforts over time and with God's help, we will begin to hear the beautiful music in our families and in our homes. In his speech at Brigham Young University several years ago, Archbishop Charles J. Chaput urged us to fight for our convictions in the public square. But the greater task, he said, is to live what we claim to believe by our actions: fidelity to God, love for our spouse and children, loyalty to friends, generosity to the poor, honesty and mercy in dealing with others, trust in the goodness of people, and discipline and humility in demanding the most from ourselves. So as we fight for our convictions in the public square, we should do so without denigrating or demeaning our opponents. My father spent much of his adult life building bridges of goodwill among the various church leaders in our community. He loved to take ministers to lunch and talk about the things that would unite them as people of faith. After one such lunch, with a minister that was not particularly fond of our church, the pastor said, "Look, Mr. Anderson, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you and I can never be friends. As long as you believe the way you do, we will be enemies. We will be at war." My quick-thinking father said, "Pastor Hahn, what are the weapons of Christian warfare?" Then they turned to the writings of the Apostle Paul, who suggested that the weapons of Christian warfare are faith and righteousness and peace. Whereupon my father said, "Reverend, let the battle begin." As we seek to defend the family against the vast forces aligned against it, we need to employ the weapons of Christian warfare, which are also clearly taught in the Quran and the Talmud. By avoiding the animosity and vitriol so prominent in our world today, and we should align ourselves with like-minded people and organizations exactly as you are doing in this World Congress of Families, reaching across divides of theology and culture to join forces with those who believe in the family. It is that important. The brilliant Catholic philosopher and United Nations Ambassador Michael J. Novak stated that, quote, "The roles of a father and a mother and of children with respect to them is the absolutely critical center of social force." He also made the sobering observation that throughout history, nations have been able to survive a multiplicity of disasters, but they have never been able to survive the disintegration of the family. Dear friends, I am honored to be with you today as you rally people of goodwill everywhere to join in protecting and strengthening the family. I am convinced that as we live our lives so that our children can hear and feel the music, they will find joy in the dance and will perform it beautifully out of desire, not compulsion. They will then be prepared to build strong families of their own and will be empowered to protect and defend the family against the increasing forces that would diminish or destroy it. As President Nelson declared in your Amsterdam World Conference, our children are our wealth. Our children are our strength. Our children are indeed our future. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this morning, and may God bless you in your efforts.
En un mundo tan desafiante, nuestro reto es ser la luz, dar amor día con